What are some solved mysteries? The Siberian craters. As the permafrost melts, the methane gas gets released and it sometimes ignites. The case of Adrienne Shelley, screenwriter for Waitress. Husband came home to find her hanging in the shower, ruled suicide. He insists she was happy and would never kill herself, promoting another view of crime scene where they found a shoe print that matched a construction worker in the building. Sure enough, the construction worker went to rob her and thought he killed her, so staged a suicide when the hanging ended up being the actual thing that killed her. Web link. That was his original testimony. He straight up killed her intentionally. The Erebus and the Terror were found a few years ago. The two ships were part of an Arctic expedition and disappeared 150 years ago. Web link. Too long, didn't read. In 1997 a really weird and loud noise was detected underwater and everyone was all WTF was that? In 2012, it was determined it was an iceberg breaking in or rubbing against the seabed. Web link. Now if only we could find an explanation for the web link. The Sailing Stones of Death Valley, video here, too long, didn't read. Rocks would magically move up to 1,500 feet in the desert. Turns out it gets cold and freezes the ground overnight and the rocks would get pushed by the ice sheets that melted under the wind. YouTube link. Web link. The pioneers used to ride those babies for miles. 1947 and British South American Airways aircraft named Stardust disappeared. Its last message was simply Stendek. After an exhausting search, no trace of the aircraft was found. For years conspiracy theories and talk of alien abduction by wackos circulated. Till 1998, when mountain climbers on a remote mountain found an engine, pieces of metal, and clothing at the bottom of a glacier on the side of Mount Tupungato. Turns out the aircraft got caught flying the wrong way in the jet stream while it was flying at night and using a system of timing when to start their descent. Being in the jet stream reduced their airspeed in relation to the Earth and they smacked themselves straight into the side of a mountain, after which an avalanche covered the wreckage. The wreckage took decades to flow down the side of the mount with the glaciers. The glacier preserved the wreck so well that 50 years later the recovery team found identifiable remains, personal items, and could read serial numbers on the engines. Amazing, one of the landing gear tires was still inflated, and that teams continued to visit the site for periodically as more of the aircraft, cargo, and remains of passengers are still emerging from the ice. While it doesn't give us who the Zodiac Killer is, just recently his most infamous 340 cipher was solved after 51 years. According to Oranchak and team, the message reads, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because IT will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. Death, web link. He basically monologues like the ass crack bandit. In 1964, Jim Templeton, a fireman from the English city of Carlisle, was spending an afternoon out with his family when he snapped a photograph of his young daughter without much thought. But when he got home and had the film developed, he noticed what has now become known as the Solway spaceman. The photo shows what many people say is a person in some form of spacesuit. Kodak even analyzed the photo and their experts said it was authentic, lending to the spaceman theory. The spaceman was his wife with her back to the camera. He was only able to see 70% of the frame and didn't realize his wife was in the background of the picture. Web link. Sadly, this was only ever a mystery to anyone who didn't pay attention to the local Aboriginals, who were pretty clear that dingoes can, will and have carried off babies. It seems so obvious that even if dingoes don't normally go after people, starving animals are still starving animals and will do things out of the ordinary. I'm still so angry thinking about the injustice done to Lindy. The whole idea that dingoes would never attack a human was such bullcrap, but they kept repeating it. Now we've had all those deaths and injuries on Fraser Island since then, proving it wrong. I feel so bad for Lindy. Even without having the death of her baby blamed on her, people still shamed her for going out there with a newborn. The Aborigines said that dingoes would eat people if they could get away with it, but those were just the natives. What do they know, right? _ What do you know Shiras looked like? When I was a kid in the 80s, all that was known were the bones of the arms with enormous claws. Hence its name, Terrible Hand. They were mostly shown grasping a small car because they were so freaking huge. The rest of the animal was a complete mystery. Was it like a giant Allosaurus, one that'd make the T-Rex look like a puppy in comparison? A few years later it seemed more likely to be ostrich-like and an omnivore. Either way, given how rare it is for fossils to form at all, I was convinced I'd die never knowing what this dinosaur actually looked like. Then surprisingly in 2014, they found more bones and it was just the weirdest thing. Web link. El Dorado, or the Lost City of Gold, turned out to be a mistranslation. It was just the name of some guy that got mistranslated to the name of a city. Sounds like exactly what someone who is on the trail would say. In the 1970s, a number of Japanese citizens disappeared from coastal areas in Japan. After many years it was found out that North Korea had abducted them. Edit. Most of the missing were in their 20s. The youngest, Megumi Yokota, was 13 when she disappeared in November 1977, from the Japanese west coast city of Niigata. Web link. In case anyone is interested, also go look up that time Kim Jong-il kidnapped a South Korean director and his actress wife, as well as the SFX team behind Godzilla in order to make his own monster movie. But why? Where is the Titanic? Most people don't realize that half of the people in the world grew up when the ship's location was still a complete mystery. Now, it's old news. Where is MH370? Gides and the Land of Ta. A few years ago, 2017, comedian Nate Fernald posted a tweet of an enamel pin he had bought of a familiar-looking friendly monster with the word Gides written under it. He was unable to find any information on what Gides is, and the mystery took the internet by storm. The mystery kept growing as someone found a sticker of Gides alongside other characters all listed as the Land of Ta. The sticker sheet was from a company called Denison. There were no Google results at all for either Gides or the Land of Ta. With multiple people researching, that was where the mystery was left off and people kind of forgot about it. But a couple years later it was solved. A podcast was made where they investigated the mystery, got a hold of the former art director of Denison back in the 80s who referred them to a few potential artists, and they found the daughter of one of the artists who had passed away, and in her father's stuff was the original pencil drawings of the creatures of the Land of Ta. It was never anything but those stickers. This internet mystery still appeared on lists for a while as unsolved. The only mystery left is who made the enamel pins, which is still a mystery but not quite as big as who is this character in this land that seems familiar but that there's no record of. I have one that most people seem to not know about. Grand Duchess Anastasia was in fact killed with the rest of her family in 1918. She never escaped, and the several women throughout the 20th century claiming to be her lied. The site of the execution of the Tsar and his family was completely untouched until 1991. Excavation found only 9 of the 11 expected remains. It wasn't until 2007 that 2 further sets of remains were found a small distance away from the previous grave site. DNA testing found that one of the sets of remains belonged to Tsarevich Alexei and the other to one of his sisters. With this find, it proved conclusively that the entire imperial family was in fact executed and buried in 1918. The Golden State Killer/East Area Rapist, Joseph James D'Angelo. A former police officer, who was sacked for burglary and mechanic. American serial rapist, murderer, burglar. Committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes and over 100 burglaries between 1973 to 1986. I was listening to the 6-part podcast called Case File, and they hadn't yet caught the suspect. But a year or so ago they finally got him after collecting DNA evidence when he put a tissue in the bin outside. It was a confirmed match. Edited to add as I just did a brief summary. Although it's been covered in the comments by me and a few others, I'll add here for clarification. He was caught a few days over 3 years ago. Time flies. He was only a cop for a short time before getting sacked. He was found shoplifting at store for supplies, like a hammer, dog repellent, at that time and not robbing a house. He left semen as evidence. Because he wasn't uploaded into the database or caught beforehand, there was no DNA match in the system. The way they got onto him as a suspect before gathering hard evidence of the tissue was a familiar match uploaded onto GenMatch by what was a third-fourth cousin of his. The officers in charge of case then went through 1,000 DNA profiles from his tree to finally narrow it down to him. They then swooped in to gather the tissue to get 100% clarity before the arrest. He was living with his daughter and 15-year-old granddaughter at the time of his arrest and was acting perfectly healthy and very fit for his age. When presenting to court, he was in a wheelchair and pretending to be senile. Such an act. He is also described by all his victims as having a very small penis. Unusually small. At crime scenes, he would pretend to talk to someone else. Go to the kitchen and make himself food or drink. Leave beer bottles at the site and go back to raping. He would break in and prepare the home before coming back a few days later to rape. By doing this, he would leave little objects, like guns or rope cut at certain lengths, and steal items. By then he would know the layout of the house. He would shine a torch in people's eyes to blind them. He'd often cry apologizing to his mummy or saying he wants his mummy. Other times he was cussing a woman named Bonnie before breaking in and raping. He would stalk and call the phone line several times. He would then call the victims after the rape and breathe heavily into the phone and or whisper. There is an audio of one of these calls. It's quite disturbing. He also went back to rape a victim. If you haven't already, listen to the podcast Case File True Crime. You can find this on Spotify. I highly recommend it. The narrator is an Aussie who does an incredible job, and his voice is lovely and very easy to listen to. He gets right into the story and doesn't mess about. Look for the episode number 53. It's a 5-part case with the following 2 bonus interviews. And an update before case file episode 83. It's also been mentioned the HBO series I'll Be Gone in the Dark is a must-watch, and about Joseph. And a book titled I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. YouTube link. In 1981, a Soviet submarine ran aground in Swedish waters. This was a huge deal, although the Soviets claimed the sub was in distress and didn't purposefully enter Swedish waters. Basically everyone in Sweden saw it as evidence that their waters were being invaded by spy subs. Plus, they did some snooping of their own and determined that the sub was emitting radiation, meaning it had nukes on board. So they went along with the Soviets' clearly false claim about an accident to help get the sub out of there, but panic was in the air. So the Swedes did exactly what you'd expect, and they prepared for more Soviet subs. I mean, when you see one Soviet sub, surely there are more, right? So Sweden developed advanced acoustic technology to detect subs, and they created a plan to basically seal off their waters when they heard a sub. And wouldn't you know it, a year later, they found a Soviet sub. Well, they didn't find it, but they absolutely heard it. And they cut off the bay and figured they just had to hunt the sub down. But after a month, they couldn't find it. They gave up and reopened the bay, but they assumed the sub found a way out. But they'll get it next time. And then it happened again, but they couldn't find it again. And then again and again with no clear pattern for a decade. What the heck? Thankfully, the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. So, no more subs, right? Niet. Because the Russian subs were still coming. Wait, what? Okay, so now nothing is making sense. At this point, the Swedish military brought in outside experts to figure out what was happening. This included oceanographer types who were obvious experts in the surrounding waters. The military then played the audio evidence of the Soviet submarines, only to be told they weren't submarines at all, they were fish, and the propeller-like sound was water being released from their swim bladders. And that's the story of how the Swedish military spent 10 years and tens of millions of dollars chasing fish farts. A Soviet sub ran aground in the town of Karlskrona, southern Sweden. Think this was 86. This one also carried nukes with it. My father worked at the naval base in Karlskrona at that time. They had to stop an old man with a shotgun in a rowboat who were going out to get the Dom Russians. Mary Toft. I mean, really, what the F? Too long, didn't read. Not suitable for work, woman starts giving birth to copious amounts of rabbit parts. Woman taken to London and studied under intense supervision, turns out she was shoving the pieces up there days before for the publicity. Human spontaneous combustion, not a real thing, it's where there was an overlooked source of ignition, then subcutaneous fat is absorbed into clothing and acts like a wick, basically they're a human candle. Edit, you might find this interesting. YouTube link. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.